Hello, everyone. This is Steve Risser, the host of Sports Talk with RKJ, and we are back doing our college. We're doing the second week of here with Justin D'Onofrio. We're back doing the second week of our college football reaction to the playoff rankings from last night, and we'll start at the top, and we'll start with the top four as LSU was put number one ahead of Ohio State, which is well deserved, beating Alabama. You got Ohio State number two. You got Clemson number three. Georgia number four, which I don't think should be number four. I think Alabama should be number four. And then the rest of the top 10 is Alabama 5, Oregon 6, Utah 7, Minnesota 8, Penn State 9, Oklahoma 10. And then we'll talk about Baylor because they're still in it. Baylor at 13. What are your reactions to this week's rankings?
LSU well-deserved number one. Not surprising at all. Ohio State, again, those have been the two top teams. There's no question. Those two should be 1, 2. But LSU definitely deserve 1. 3, Clemson. They're starting to play very well. It looks like they're starting to hit their peak. The big controversy this week was the 4-5. Who was going to get it, Georgia or Alabama? Georgia got it. And I know we talked about this on the regular show a few minutes ago. Georgia, I feel like got over Alabama because they got those two signature wins. I know Notre Dame's sitting there at 17th and got blown out by Notre Dame, but still a signature win. They did beat number 11 Florida. Alabama's best wins is Texas A&M, and they're not even in the playoff rankings right now. So that's the best win for Bama. Oregon is 6 and 7. I think Oregon and Utah, for having one loss, they're loving life because they went out. That winner, if it all stays like this, which who knows, it's college football, you never know. The winner, I feel like, in the Pac-12 should definitely jump Alabama if it's Oregon or Utah in the Pac-12 championship game. So I think the Pac-12 is sitting in a beautiful spot right now, and they have to be loving life if they're the Pac-12 for having each one lost. Minnesota over Penn State, that 8-9, I'm fine with. Minnesota should probably be ranked higher than Penn State. I was hoping they were going to crack the top 6 because they do have a better win.
There's no way Minnesota should be cracking the top 6.
They do have a better win than Utah, Oregon, and you can even go they have a better win than Alabama. They have one of the best wins in the country. I would have loved to see it.
That win was at home. We'll see what they do next week at Iowa.
Yeah, we'll see. I have them win that one. Penn State at 5 or 9. Fine with that. Oklahoma losing a spot as they did not play well against Iowa State. And then Baylor sitting at 13th. This is a fine spot for me right now because their strength of schedule right now at this point is a 68. They played 3 cupcakes in that conference: San Antonio or UTSA, Texas San Antonio, Rice, and I think their FCS opponent was Stephen of Austin. So those are 2 of the worst FBS teams, and then you play a mediocre FCS team. So I'm fine with Baylor, and I do have Baylor sitting. I do have Baylor knocking off Oklahoma this week. The other thing is too, the first playoff ranking going back last week, Ohio State was number 1. Whatever team in the first week who has been chosen to be number 1 in the first playoff ranking has never won the national championship, and now they're ranked number 2, and no number 2 team in the second week of the ranking, ranked second, has won the national championship. So a bad spot for Ohio State. And then one tidbit on LSU: they're the first team since 1945. It was either Notre Dame or Army that won the national championship year to beat 4 top 10 teams through the first 9 games of their schedule. And then it's only happened 3 times. I think it was Army in 1945. And then it was either Notre Dame. It was Notre Dame in 1943. I may have those 2 flip-flopped. It was either those 2. Both those times they both won national championships. So LSU could be sitting in a good spot. It's history, but it's just crazy too. I wanted to point that out because that hasn't happened forever. That somebody's beating 4 top 25 teams like that. So I feel it's pretty impressive. And LSU, for deserving number 1.
Yes, and the big beef I have with the rankings is the fact that Georgia, who lost to South Carolina, is ahead of Alabama. That is absolutely ridiculous. They lost to South Carolina, who's not even going to make a bowl game, and Alabama loses to LSU, and Georgia is ranked 4th, and Alabama is ranked 5th. That makes absolutely no sense. Does the committee want ratings for this week's Auburn-Georgia game? Maybe, but that makes absolutely no sense at all for Alabama to be ranked below Georgia. It makes makes no sense. And looking at the rest of them, I disagree with you there. I even think if Bama loses one game and say Oregon loses one game, I still think Bama gets in over Oregon. I would take Bama over Oregon because Bama's loss was better. Oregon lost to Auburn, and they play in a worse conference too. So I definitely would take Alabama over Oregon. If when push comes to shove, I would take Alabama over Oregon.
I disagree with you there, but because I think a championship, winning a conference championship should hold higher. Now, you could go back and say, too, the head-to-head, if Alabama knocks off Auburn, Oregon has to win their one loss. But Oregon would have a signature win against number 7 Utah if it stays like that. Alabama may beat Auburn, but Auburn's sitting 12th right now. And if they lose to Georgia, and I think Auburn still got one more tough one after I think it's just Alabama after that for them. So they could, if they lose this weekend, they could be back 15-16. Utah could be sitting there for Oregon 6 or 7. So that's where I disagree there. I think conference championship should matter more than a head-to-head tiebreaker. But again, I wouldn't be shocked that they put Alabama ahead of them because Alabama is just Alabama. And then going to your Georgia, I'm fine with Georgia there 4. I think Alabama eye test is 4, but again, the 2 signature wins for Georgia does lift. It should lift them over Alabama, and we've seen that the committee hasn't penalized you for losing a close game. If they lost to South Carolina by 4 touchdowns, like for example, Ohio State has against Purdue and Iowa, sure, then I'd probably disagree with that. But they didn't play great. They hung in there. It was not one of their best games. And they still hung in there. They had a chance. Their kicker missed a field goal. Their kicker misses the field goal. They're undefeated. And they'd probably sit there at 3. I think they'd be ahead of Clemson at this moment. So, I'm fine with Georgia at 4 because Alabama really. And I know it's been injuries, and they're second in the country of starting the most freshmen. I think they're starting 8 true freshmen at this moment. But I want to go back to the Tennessee game. If Tennessee doesn't fumble that touchdown right at the end zone, that's a totally different game. That's probably a 1-score game, and that Tennessee team's getting better, but it ain't one of Phil Fulmer Tennessee teams. That's not a mediocre Tennessee team. So I know they've been banged up, Alabama too, but I'm fine with it because Alabama, they played great against Arkansas, but it's Arkansas. They just fired their coach. They lost by 35 points at Western Kentucky. I'm fine with Georgia sitting there over Alabama. I'm fine with it.
We look at the Big Ten, and we look. Obviously, Ohio State is number 2, but we look at Penn State and Minnesota, and I think if Minnesota wins out, they'll definitely make the play. It's gonna be very hard for Minnesota to win out because they got to go to Iowa, they got to beat Wisconsin, they're probably gonna have to beat Ohio State or Penn State again in the Big Ten championship game. But I think Penn State still has a shot because their loss was against a team that wasn't in their division of the Big Ten. They lost to Minnesota, so if they could beat Ohio State and win the Big Ten East and win the Big Ten championship, I would even take them over. I probably wouldn't take them over Alabama, but I would definitely take them over Oregon if they win the Big Ten. And looking at Oklahoma, they probably are on the outside looking in. They probably have the least chance. Baylor has to go undefeated to get to even be considered for the Final Four, and then Oklahoma definitely has to win out to win the Big 12 to even be considered for the top 4.
Yeah, I'll start with the Big 10 first. I think Minnesota, yeah, definitely. They run the table. They go undefeated. They're definitely in. There's no question that. Penn State, I think the best thing for Penn State, of course, they got to knock off Ohio State first. The best thing for them is to hope Minnesota goes to Indianapolis, it's in Indianapolis, Big Ten championship game, to go undefeated and then to knock off Minnesota there. I think it'd be much better for Penn State to knock off Minnesota, avenge that loss, than to play a Wisconsin who they didn't play. That would still be a great win, but to avenge that loss, I feel like would help a lot, would really help their bid to get in. And Penn, I think the Brett Shot, Ohio State, of course, sitting there number 2. You hope Chase Young's back. I hope he'll be back for Penn State just because it'll be be fun to watch them play against those 2 teams. Of course, they're sitting in a great spot. And then the Big 12, I think they're definitely in the most trouble right now. I think if Baylor loses this weekend, unless a total chaos breaks out in the next couple weeks, I don't think Oklahoma will get in, and that will 100% knock Baylor out. Even if they get to try to avenge it against Oklahoma, if they meet in Dallas, the Big 12 championship game, I still don't think Baylor would get in. So their best shot right now, Baylor. I don't think Oklahoma has any chance right now unless there's total chaos because of the way they're playing. Their defense looks like the past Oklahoma defenses. It looked better last couple of weeks, or it looked better before the Kansas State and Iowa State game where they have not looked good. Defensively, their offense is still putting up points like nothing. But the Big 12, I think, is in the most trouble right now.
Yeah, I would agree that the Big 12, looking at where their teams are ranked, is definitely in big trouble. But a huge game this week for those two teams, Oklahoma and Baylor. So now we're going to do our what do we think the top 10 is going to be going to next. What will be the top 10 by next Tuesday? And I'm going to start. I think LSU obviously stays number one because they play Ole Miss. Ohio State. The top three will be the top three because LSU plays Ole Miss. They'll win that. So Ohio State, Rutgers, they'll obviously easily win that. And then Clemson and Wake Forest. Against Wake Forest, they'll win that. I think Georgia stays at 4 because I think they beat Auburn close. I think Bama stays at 5 because they'll beat Mississippi State. Oregon stays at 6 because they'll beat Arizona. Utah will stay at 7 because they'll beat UCLA. I think the change is Penn State jumps up to 8 because I think Minnesota loses to Iowa. I think that Oklahoma is at 9 because they beat Baylor. And I think number 10 is going to be tough between Florida and Minnesota. But just because Florida is an SEC team, I'll have them at 10.
So I agree with you. The top 3. The only issue is LSU missing 3, I think, of their starting offensive linemen this week. I think they'll be okay still, but maybe a little bit challenging this week. Ohio State, of course, 2. Imagine what that line would be if Chase Young was playing. As I think it's at 53 right now without Chase Young. 3, Clemson, of course. 4, Georgia. I think they'll pull it out. 5, I'm going to go with Bama. 6. Because I have Baylor winning. I'm going to jump Baylor up to 6 if they knock. Well, no, I'm going to change that because I don't think the committee's so high on Oklahoma, so I don't know how far they'd skyrocket. I'm going to go Oregon 6. I'm going to go Minnesota. No, I'm going to go Minnesota 6. I think they beat Iowa. Yeah, I think they beat Iowa. They'll go to 6. I think Oregon 6 at 7.
So you think Minnesota jumps Oregon?
I think they will because they're undefeated and they got the 2 signature wins now. Yeah. Iowa is 20. They'll probably be knocked out with a loss. They did get Penn State, so I think they're going to reward Minnesota for that, knocking off Penn State. So I'm going Minnesota 6, 7 Oregon. 8, I'm going to go Utah. 9, I'm going to think Penn State's going to hold. 10, I'm going to go Florida because I think Auburn goes down. I don't think they'll jump. And Oklahoma, of course, with them losing, I think they're going to go down. So I think Baylor can maybe jump the top 6. I don't, I don't know if they're better than Minnesota. That's where I'm kind of struggling at. But I think Minnesota has a better win at Penn State because the committee does not value Oklahoma as a great team right now. They did give Penn State the 4 until last week. I think they still value Penn State. If they have one loss and going, I think they have a much better chance of one loss than Oklahoma does.
That's going to wrap it up this week for our college football reaction show. For my co-host Justin D'Onofrio, I'm Steve Risser. We'll be posting this video around, I'd say I post this video probably around like 1 o'clock today. And obviously I'll post the video of our regular show at around 5 o'clock today. But at around noon, be able to listen to my week 11 preview in the NFL. So we want to thank you for listening to the show and hope you come back at noon to listen to my week 11 preview. See you later on today, guys.